"You're no longer a fit for where this company is heading," Ronald said, his voice cold and clipped. I stared at him across the polished mahogany desk, the same desk where we'd once shaken hands over promises of the future. Rain streaked down the windows behind him, blurring the city skyline into gray smudges. The room smelled faintly of old leather and fresh coffee, a smell I used to find comforting. Now, it turned my stomach. I thought he was joking. I waited for the punchline. It never came. Instead, he reached into a drawer and pulled out a thin manila envelope. He placed it carefully on the table between us, like a priest offering last rites. Inside, a severance agreement, neat, clinical, as if the last 4 years of my life could be folded up, stapled, and filed away without a second thought. "Nothing personal, Daniel," he said, smoothing the lapels of his tailored suit. "It's just business." Business. That word, sharp and hollow, echoed in my head as I opened the envelope with numb fingers. 4 years. 4 years of sacrifice, of dreaming, of building something real. 4 years of trusting a man who saw me not as a partner, but as a stepping stone. I wasn't angry. Not yet. There was something deeper settling inside me. Something colder, sharper, because even as he fired me, even as he stole my invention right out from under me, I knew something Ronald Graves didn't. I wasn't done yet. They told me Canada was the land of second chances. I believed them. Maybe that's why, even after that meeting, even after Ronald's betrayal, I couldn't help but think back to where it all started. It wasn't much, just a cracked second-hand laptop, a half-broken coffee maker, and a tiny basement apartment on the east side of Toronto where the heat barely worked. In winter, that's where Mediskin was born, not in a fancy lab. Not in some gleaming innovation hub, just as a stubborn kid with a dream and a notebook full of crazy ideas. I wasn't anyone important. My parents had brought me to Canada when I was 10, chasing a better life. I grew up learning how to fix things. Bikes, computers, anything that broke and couldn't afford to be replaced. Maybe that's why I believed in Mediskin so fiercely, because it wasn't just a machine. It was a second chance, for people who couldn't afford specialists, for small-town clinics miles away from major hospitals, for anyone who ever sat in a waiting room, hoping for answers that never came fast enough. The idea was simple, in theory. Handheld, AI-powered device that could scan, process, and deliver preliminary diagnoses in minutes. Fast, affordable, life-saving. 4 years. 4 years of late nights, missed holidays, prototypes that exploded, melted, or just flat-out refused to work. 4 years of scraping by, picking up contract work to keep the lights on, pouring every spare dollar back into Mediskin. When Novatech Medical Devices offered me a job, it felt like a sign. Finally, access to real labs, real equipment, real funding. And then there was Ronald Graves. Tall, charismatic, the kind of man who filled a room without even trying. He told me Novatech wasn't just a company, it was a family, and that he saw something in me. "You're the future, Daniel," he said, clapping me on the back the day I signed my contract. "Mediskin's going to change the world, and you're going to lead that change." I wanted to believe him. God, I needed to. For a while, it seemed like I had made it. Mediskin prototypes were improving. Investors were starting to take notice. My name was whispered in meetings with words like visionary and rising star. Standing in that glass tower, staring out over Lake Ontario, I thought, finally, everything was about to pay off. I had no idea then that the man I trusted the most was already sharpening the knife. At first, I told myself it was nothing, just corporate growing pains. Just Ronald being cautious with something this big. When he asked me to upload the Mediskin source files to the company server, I didn't even hesitate. It made sense. We were getting serious. Meetings with investors, legal paperwork, marketing, plans. Of course they needed centralized access. Right? Still, a part of me hesitated when I hit send. I buried that feeling, told myself it was paranoia, that Ronald had always supported me, that he had my back. Then came the first real crack. There was a meeting about Mediskin's commercialization strategy, and I wasn't invited. I found out when a coworker mentioned it casually over coffee. Big. Moves coming, huh? He said, nudging me. You must be pumped after the presentation yesterday. Presentation? I hadn't even known there was one. I laughed it off, told myself it was a simple scheduling error. No big deal, but it happened again, and again. Meetings I wasn't told about. Emails I wasn't copied on. Conversations that went silent when I walked into the room. One afternoon, I tried to access the development files to fine-tune a diagnostic algorithm. Access denied. Confused, I reached out to IT. They told me, politely, mechanically, that access protocols had changed. All Mediskin files were now restricted to executive clearance only. Executive clearance. Meaning Ronald, and no one else. That night, as I sat alone in my apartment, I opened my old laptop and stared at the first designs I had ever drawn. Crude sketches of a handheld scanner that could change everything. I tried to tell myself it was just the cost of success, that maybe I was being left out because Ronald was handling the bigger business side of things. Maybe he was protecting me. Maybe. Or maybe he was protecting something else. The final blow came 2 weeks later, an email. A misrouted message meant, for someone else, landed in my inbox. I opened it without thinking, half distracted, sipping lukewarm coffee. It was a short thread between Ronald and one of our investors, finalizing IP transfer for Mediskin under my personal portfolio. Should be complete before quarter end. Thanks for pushing this through quietly. My hands went cold. The mug slipped from my fingers, shattering on the kitchen floor. Transfer. Personal. Portfolio. Quietly. Words that didn't just sting, they gutted me. I had built Mediskin with my own hands, my own sleepless nights, my own stubborn belief that it could matter. And now it was slipping away. Not because I wasn't good enough, not because the idea had failed, but because I had trusted the wrong man. Even then, I wanted to believe it wasn't too late, that I could still fix it. I had no idea just how far Ronald Graves was willing to go. It happened on a Tuesday. I remember because the rain hadn't stopped for 2 days, and downtown Toronto looked like it was drowning. Gray skies, gray streets, gray faces. Ronald had called an emergency all-hands meeting. Big announcement, he said. A game changer. I arrived early, still stupidly hopeful. Maybe this was it, the official launch of Mediskin. Maybe today, after 4 brutal years, I would finally see the dream become real. The conference room was packed. Reporters, investors, board members with crisp suits and tighter smiles. I took a seat near the front, my heart hammering in my chest. Ronald walked in like a conquering hero, tailored navy suit, gold cufflinks flashing under the fluorescent lights. He didn't look at me. Not once. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice warm, practiced. "Today, I am proud to introduce the future of medical diagnostics. Mediskin." The first slide flashed onto the massive screen. Mediskin patent owner. Ronald Graves. For a moment, I thought my brain had short-circuited. I stared at the words, willing them to change. They didn't. Ronald talked for nearly 30 minutes, about innovation, about perseverance, about his personal journey, bringing Mediskin to life. He used stories, my stories, about late nights, scrapped designs, breakthrough moments. He laughed at all the right places, nodded humbly at the applause, and he never once said my name, not even a thank you, not even a footnote. When the clapping finally died down, Ronald stepped off the stage and made a beeline straight for me. He clapped me on the shoulder like an old friend. "You should be proud, Daniel," he said, smiling that polished CEO smile. "There's no Mediaskin. Without you, you'll always have that. Always have that. Like it was a trophy. Like it was enough." 3 days later, HR called me into a glass-walled office. No Ronald this time. Just a grim-faced woman sliding another envelope across another polished desk. "Your position is being phased out, Daniel. It's nothing personal. Just a strategic realignment." Strategic realignment. That's how they phrased stealing a man's life's work. I packed up my office in silence. No goodbye party, no handshake. Just the cold metallic scrape of my belongings shoved into a cardboard box. As I stood by the elevator, waiting for the doors to open, I made myself a promise. I would not go quietly. I would not let him walk away clean. I didn't rage. I didn't scream. I didn't storm into Ronald's office and demand what was mine. No, that would have been a mistake, a scene he could twist, a meltdown he could weaponize. If he was going to bury me quietly, I was going to bury him even quieter. First, I made copies, every blueprint, every development log, every time-stamped email showing my work long before Novatech ever touched it. Sophia Clark helped. Underneath her professional smile, Sophia was furious when she found out what Ronald had done. But she was smart, smarter than me. She knew how to move in silence. She flagged internal memos where Ronald reclassified Mediskin as company-owned, without proper disclosures. She showed me patent filings that conveniently left my name off. She even found meeting minutes edited after the fact to erase my contributions. I built a wall of evidence, solid, undeniable. But evidence alone wasn't enough. I needed a way to use it, a way to hurt Ronald where it counted. That's when I thought of Ethan Zhao. Ethan, my best friend from undergrad. The kid who once stayed up all night soldering wires with me in a frozen garage. Now a strategic advisor at MedCore Innovations, Novatech's biggest competitor. I called him, told him everything. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Ethan's voice, low and calm. "Send me what you have. Tonight." No hesitation, no empty promises, just action. I spent the next 4 hours compiling everything. File after file, email after email, charting the theft in painful clinical detail. When I hit send, my hands were steady. I wasn't naive anymore. I wasn't scared. If Ronald Graves thought he could erase me, he was about to find out just how wrong he was. It didn't take long. Ethan moved faster than I ever could have imagined. Within a week, MedCore's legal team had reviewed every file I sent, every blueprint, every time-stamped draft, every email Sophia had salvaged from Novatech's sanitized records. The verdict was clear. Mediskin was mine. And Ronald had left a trail a mile wide. Mr. Bernard King, MedCore's CEO, didn't waste time. He called me personally. "We want it all, Daniel," he said, his voice calm but sharp. "Your device, your story, your name, on the record." There was no hesitation on my part, no second-guessing. I signed the licensing deal within days. Tight, clean, ironclad. MedCore would launch Mediskin under their banner. I would be recognized, publicly and legally, as the sole inventor. The clause I insisted on, the one I cared about most, was simple. Ronald Graves and Novatech medical devices were permanently barred from claiming any connection to Mediskin. Ever. Then came the press conference. Didn't attend. I didn't need to. I watched it from my apartment, cheap beer in hand, laptop balanced on my knees. Medcore's VP of Product stepped onto the stage and unveiled Mediskin to the world. There it was, sleek, beautiful, alive. And right there, projected, 20 feet tall behind her, my name, Daniel Park, lid inventor, Mediskin Technology. The next morning, headlines exploded across Canada. Engineer exposes corporate theft in shocking medical tech scandal. Medcore's new star, the true creator of Mediskin, speaks out. Novatech under fire after allegations of IP fraud surface. Deborah Mitchell, the investigative reporter Sophia had tipped off, ran a full exposé. She uncovered Ronald's internal memos, the altered meeting records, the misfiled patents, emails, contracts, all pointing to one undeniable truth. Ronald Graves hadn't just stolen an idea. He had tried to rewrite history. And now, history was writing him out instead. Novatech's stock plummeted within days. Investors bailed. Clients pulled out. Board members resigned. Facing mounting lawsuits and public outrage, Novatech had no choice. They fired Ronald. No golden parachute. No public send-off. Just a brief, embarrassed press release. Ronald Graves has chosen to pursue other opportunities. Didn't choose anything we chose for him. I didn't throw a party. I didn't pop champagne. I just sat back and let the truth do what it always does. I let it burn him down. Ronald Graves resigned 2 months later. There was no farewell party. No framed awards. No handshakes from grateful board members. Just a terse, company-wide email at 6:42 a.m. Effective immediately, Ronald Graves has stepped down from his position as CEO of Novatech Medical Devices. No explanation, no apology. But everyone knew. Within days, Novatech spiraled into free fall. Investors fled, contracts were terminated. Once promising partnerships vanished overnight. By the end of the fiscal quarter, Novatech was little more than a smoldering ruin. A cautionary tale whispered behind closed doors in every major boardroom in Toronto. As for Ronald, he disappeared from the industry altogether. No consulting gigs, no speaking tours, no LinkedIn triumphant announcements, just silence. The man who once filled rooms with his presence was now invisible, forgotten. And me? I didn't celebrate. There were no victory laps, no champagne-soaked parties, just a quiet sense of closure. I took the payout from the Medcore licensing deal and started my own company. Small, focused, built not on corporate politics, but on the simple belief that good ideas and the people behind them deserved better. The first office was nothing glamorous. A shared space above a bakery that smelled perpetually of fresh bread and burnt coffee, peeling paint, rattling, windows, second-hand desks that creaked if you leaned too hard. But it was mine, every inch of it. Mine. There were no glass-walled conference rooms, no men in tailored suits making promises they didn't intend to keep. Just a handful of young engineers, a battered whiteboard full of crazy ideas, and the quiet, stubborn belief that we could build something better. Something honest, something real. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't chasing someone else's dream. I was building my own, and that was the only revenge I ever really needed. It happened about a year later. I was speaking at a tech innovation conference in Montreal. A small event, nothing like the high-stakes arenas Ronald used to dominate. Just a handful of startups, some curious investors, and a scattering of students looking for inspiration. I wasn't there to sell anything. I wasn't even there to impress anyone. I was there to tell a story, to share what I had learned about resilience, betrayal, and the quiet power of starting over. The auditorium wasn't full. Maybe 60 people. Tops. But as I stood there, adjusting the microphone, scanning the small crowd, I saw him, Ronald Graves, sitting, alone in the back row, no suit, no entourage, no confident swagger. Just a man in a worn-out jacket slumped in his seat, staring at the floor like he wished he could disappear into it. He looked older, smaller, dimmed. No one else seemed to recognize him. No one whispered his name. No one cared. He was just another tired face in a sea of strangers, forgotten by the world he once thought he ruled. For a brief moment, our eyes met. There was no anger there, no hatred, just emptiness. And strangely, I didn't feel hatred either. Not pity, not triumph, just peace. I nodded slightly, a small, polite gesture. No bitterness, no gloating. Then I turned back to the microphone. "Good afternoon," I began, my voice steady. "My name is Daniel Park, and today I want to talk to you about second chances." As I spoke, I let the words carry me forward, past the betrayals, past the scars, into a future Ronald Graves would never again be part of.